I became interested in whether human consciousness survives the death of the body through trying to help a friend with a fear of flying, which, after we discussed it, actually translated into a fear of annihilation. Many people are afraid of dying, so my friend's not alone, and the situation is not helped by death being a taboo subject in the materialist West. Well, this was many years ago, and back then, when I put the phrase scientific proof of an afterlife into Google, 29,500 websites popped up in the usual half a second. I don't know why I even did that, since I had no interest in, nor belief in, life after death. But on Google today, if you input the same phrase, you'll find hundreds of thousands of afterlife websites, such as the burgeoning interest in this subject. So back then, I examined some of these websites, and I was fascinated by their contents. I became a bookworm for afterlife subjects, and I accepted much of the evidence as valid. My reading included academic books, such as Frederick Meyer's classic work, Human Personality and its Survival of Bodily Death, but also the first-hand autobiographies of mediums that skeptics might mock, people like Doris Stokes, the famous British medium, who attracted audiences of thousands back in the 1980s. And more recently, Lisa Williams, born in Birmingham in 1973, and well known in the United States for her television shows. So then I asked myself, if I had to identify which books had been most influential for me, which ones would I choose? And I must say that keeping this list to just a few titles is really difficult. But here goes. The first book I bought had a big impact, not least because it was the first book that I read. Its title is On the Edge of the Etheric, and its author, Arthur Findlay. First published in 1931, it's still in print, and I couldn't put it down. Arthur Findlay was a wealthy Scottish stockbroker. In 1918, he attended a séance with the direct voice medium John Campbell Sloan at a spiritualist church in Glasgow, and he was so impressed by what he witnessed that during the next 5 years he attended many séances at the medium's home and took a rational, investigative approach to the evidence. He became convinced that voices really were speaking through Mr. Sloan. There are only 2 photographs available of this medium, and this is one of them. Findlay noted that this medium had a full-time job and refused remuneration for his séances, so he had no financial motive for fraud. It was through Sloan's mediumship that this psychic historian and researcher was reunited with his dead father. He writes that his father told him things that no other living person knew, which was very convincing for him. But more importantly, Findlay's research caused him to grade his evidential cases either A1 or A2 according to the quality of the evidence. Of the around 180 A1 cases, 3 were examined by a mathematician. He says, on calculating the chances of correctly guessing all the facts recorded, answers with such accuracy, the odds were 5 million to 1 against chance being the explanation. Here's an example of one of John Sloan's seances as quoted from Findlay's book. It says, for 3 hours, dozens of voices were speaking. Men's voices, women's voices, children's voices, all of which I was told came from people called dead. A woman's voice spoke to a man sitting on my left. It gave a name and referred to happenings at his home. It specifically referred to Tom, a son, who was giving his father trouble. And then came advice as to how it should be dealt with. Intimate family matters were discussed between my neighbour and this female voice, and finally with love it said goodbye. That was my wife, he told Findlay. I never come here, but she comes back to me. She always knows everything that's going on at home. In 1920, Findlay founded the Glasgow Society for Psychical Research, and 3 years later he took part in the Church of Scotland's inquiry into psychic phenomena. This was the year that he retired from his profession, and he moved to England and purchased his next home, Stanstead Hall in Essex, a manor house built in 1871. Today, Stanstead is also the location of London's third airport. In 1932, together with the trans-medium Maurice Barbanel, Findlay became a founding member of the spiritualist newspaper Psychic News, which is still published today. And he went on to write numerous influential books on spiritual topics, including The Way of Life, The Unfolding Universe, The Psychic Stream, The Rock of Truth, and Where Two Worlds Meet, 11 books in all. When he died in 1964, in his will, Findlay left his home, Stanstead Hall, to the Spiritualist National Union as a college for the advancement of psychic science. Named the Arthur Findlay College, to this day it remains a home for the training and development of mediums. So now you have an inkling of who the author was, and in a sense, Findlay was one of the giants of British spiritualism. I recommend this title, On the Edge of the Etheric. And just so you know, Wikipedia has rubbished this book, and also the medium John Sloan. But then they would, wouldn't they? If you read it, you can make up your own mind. Now, if you're looking for the best evidence for psychic phenomena, then don't be surprised by my choice of a book entitled Best Evidence. Michael Schmicker, its author, worked as an American investigative reporter and describes his book as a 3-year quest to uncover the best scientific evidence, but in this case for a far wider range of psychic phenomena than just survival after death. My paperback copy, published in 2002, covers extrasensory perception, poltergeists, dowsing, near-death experiences, reincarnation, and what he describes as other impossible phenomena that refuse to disappear. This book has endorsements from eminent researchers such as Dr. Larry Dossey, Dr. Dean Radin, and Dr. Stanley Krippner, and even the astronaut Edgar Mitchell, and I recommend it. Now, if you like a good yarn and an easy read, then you might be interested in You Cannot Die by the former Canadian sociology professor Ian Curry. Launched in 1978, it provides an excellent summary of 100 years of research evidence for the survival of human consciousness. It's also been published under the title Visions of Immortality. The choice of topics is slightly different from Schmicker's book, covering, for example, apparitions, hauntings, out-of-body experiences, deathbed visions, and resuscitation experiences, as well as mediumistic communications, and with the final chapter on the realm beyond death. It provides sundry anecdotes about meetings with the spirits of the dead, sprinkled with references to psychical researchers such as Stanislav Grof, Ian Stevenson, Kenneth Ring, and others. Here's just one entertaining example of its contents from page 33. On the night of June the 11th, 1923, in Indianapolis, Mrs. Gladys Watson was wakened from a deep sleep by someone quietly but insistently calling her name. As she roused and sat up, she was astonished to see her paternal grandfather, to whom she was actually devoted, and he was leaning towards her. He looked perfectly real and lifelike. There was a pleasant smile on his face. "Don't be frightened," he assured her, in a warm, affectionate voice. "It's only me, I've just died." "This is how they'll bury me," her grandfather said, indicating the dark suit and black bow tie that he was wearing. He added, "I just wanted to tell you that I've been waiting to go over ever since Mother was taken." Gladys Watson noticed that her grandfather looked as solid as if he were physically present in the room, and she heard his voice not with an inner ear, but as though he were actually speaking to her. Mrs. Watson shook her husband, but the apparition had vanished before he awakened. He assured her she'd simply been dreaming and that her grandfather was alive and well with her parents in Wilmington. But because she was so upset, he decided to prove it by phoning them, only to learn that his wife's grandfather had died at home only a few minutes before. Well, that's the first 3 books, and I've decided it's pretty well impossible to narrow all these publications down to what might be called the best few. So instead, here are some more with the most varied appeal. Of course, if you accept the evidence for life after death, you're bound to wonder just what it's like on the other side. Numerous spirits have described this, either channeling through mediums or through automatic writing. So meet Monsignor Robert Hugh Benson, an English Anglican vicar who in 1903 abandoned the Church of England in favour of the Roman Catholic Church and was ordained a priest in 1904. He died 10 years later, aged only 42. Significantly, he was the son of Edward White Benson, the former Church of England Archbishop of Canterbury. From the other side, Benson communicated through the medium Anthony Borgia, a man he'd known when he was alive. Through Borgia, he channeled a good deal of descriptive material on what it was like in the spirit dimension. Life in the World Unseen became a famous book, translated into numerous other languages. The first part mentions the highest spheres and the lowest, and in the latter part he actually visits them, describing what he saw and what took place there. This short extract from page 214 describes Benson moving from one region of the afterlife to another. We immediately felt ourselves to be floating, but this sensation ceased abruptly after what seemed about a second of time, and thereafter we had no sensation of movement whatsoever. A light flashed before our eyes. It was extremely bright, but it was by no means startling. It vanished as quickly as it came, and coincidental with its disappearance, I could feel the solid ground under my feet. And then the first vision of this high realm opened before our eyes. We were in a dominion of unparalleled beauty. There is no imagination upon the earth that can visualize such inexpressible beauty, and I can only give some meagre details of what we saw in the limited terms of the earth plane. If you wish to compare Benson's description with the views of others, there are plenty of alternatives. The Realities of Heaven, 50 Spirits Describe Your Future Home, was published in 2015, and it provides a compendium of statements about the afterlife made between 1852 and 2001 by spirits relating their experience. The editor, Miles Edward Allen, examined nearly 1,000 descriptions of the realms that face us all when we leave the physical world. And notably, quite a few of the views given are actually inconsistent with each other. For example, regarding the location of the afterlife, one says, "Now, about this element in which we live, it undoubtedly has a place in space, for it's all around the earth." While another says, "The spirit world lies between 60 and 120 miles from the terrestrial surface." Another says, "The spheres spoken of by returning spirits are not localities by any means, but they are conditions of mind, states of being." Another says, "We are usually not much further from the earth than your moon is. But this is not a static reality. We don't rotate as the planets do. We're more in suspension than in orbit." I must emphasize what an interesting book this is, and how unlike it is from other books, with its wide range of comparisons of what afterlife spirits assert. And despite my pointing out these disparities, there are also many similarities that Miles Allen has reported in his book. Alternatively, you could get hold of Geraldine Cummins' 2 books, Beyond Human Personality and The Road to Immortality. This Irish medium was perhaps the most celebrated proponent of automatic writing in the last century. And in this book, the dead Frederick Myers tells what the various planes in the spirit world are like, and in particular, he discusses the concept of the group soul, which is hardly referred to in Miles Allen's book. Myers was one of the founders of the British Society for Psychical Research and author of this classic book I've already mentioned, Human Personality and Its Survival of Bodily Death. By the way, I should add that, in my view, Human Personality is not a particularly easy read, so unless you're a serious student of this subject, it's not one of the best, but it is, historically speaking, one of the most important. Instead, you might find Geraldine Cummings' book on Myers' views on the afterlife more interesting. Let's take a different tack now with a book called Journeys Out of the Body. In 1958, Robert Monroe experienced an unusual phenomenon he described as sensations of paralysis and vibration, accompanied by a bright light that appeared to be shining on him from a shallow angle. And this occurred several times over the next few weeks, culminating in his first out-of-body experience, or OBE as they're called. Monroe recorded his astral travels in spirit dimensions, but didn't publish it until 1971 as Journeys Out of the Body. It's a gripping read, and he went on to become a prominent researcher in the field of human consciousness. The Monroe Institute he founded in the Blue Mountains of Virginia trains people wanting these experiences, with residential courses available in the UK as well. Later, he wrote 2 more out-of-body books, Far Journeys in 1985 and Ultimate Journey in 1994. I can't recommend one of these books over any of the others, but the psychiatrist Elizabeth Kubler-Ross feels that Ultimate Journey, published in 1994, is the best of them. Each absorbing book takes you into unknown dimensions beyond the physical universe, and they could possibly exceed your boggle threshold. Here's a short sample of Monroe's return to his body after one such astral journey. My physical body appeared to be not one, but 2, much as when your vision is slightly impaired by astigmatism. They seemed very close together, no more than 3 or 4 inches apart, one slightly behind and fainter than the other. I approached the nearest of the 2 slowly and slid into it very easily. I held this position for several moments. It seemed as if I were partially interspersed with the physical, yet not quite in phase. The condition had a familiarity that took me all the way back to the vibration I first encountered and the physical paralysis that went with it. From there, it was easy to re-enter the physical with a simple twitch-like movement, akin to a shrug of the shoulders. By the way, a colleague of Bob Monroe's and a graduate of his institute is Thomas Campbell, a nuclear physicist and author of My Big Toe, where TOE stands for Theory of Everything. This covers related territory to Monroe's book, and you can buy it either as 3 separate books or one big trilogy of 820 pages. But be warned, it's expensive, so you might do just as well to get the gist of his message by looking him up on YouTube. I could go on identifying readable afterlife books, but we need to end somewhere. So I'll do it with the work of Doctors Joel Witten and Michael Newton. Both have used hypnotherapy, but of an unusual kind, exploring the elusive period supposed to exist when a person has just died and is waiting on the other side for his or her successive life. So these 2 authors both affirm the existence of reincarnation. Michael Newton is the more famous, but Dr. Witten got to this subject first with his book Life Between Life, published in 1987. And it's subtitled Scientific Explorations into the Void Separating One Incarnation from the Next. Dr. Witten, who died in 2017, co-authored it with Joe Fisher, and the book is based on 13 years of Witten's research and over 30 medical case histories, drawing upon a new technique of deep hypnotic regression. The book was actually translated into over 100 languages. Dr. Newton does something similar, writing 3 best-selling books translated into 40 languages. Journey of Souls was published in 1994, Destiny of Souls was published in 2000, and Life Between Lives Hypnotherapy in 2004. Newton, who died in 2016, was a Life Between Lives therapist for over 40 years, and he worked with over 7,000 clients. This therapy is intended to reconnect you with your soul self, your spirit guides, as well as awakening your sense of your immortality. The impression I've gained is that what appears to happen during the space between lives does not reflect fully what other completely dead souls report about the afterlife. But that is not to say that these books are not worth reading. So, to judge for yourself, this is from page 78 of Witten's book, Life Between Life. Metaconsciousness, it says, makes it very clear that whereas death is truly a homecoming, a welcome respite from strife and struggle, birth is the first day of a tough new project. And while there are those who look forward with eagerness and anticipation to the challenges of earthly existence, most view with reluctance the thought of surrendering the timeless, spaceless bardo for material inhibition. Now I'll turn to some websites you may like. The first has a free weekly newsletter you can sign up for, with news from around the world about psychical research, new publications, and documentaries, ones like mine. You need to go to www.victorzammit.com. Victor is a retired Australian lawyer, and together with his wife Wendy has published a concise paperback with a comprehensive collection of empirical evidence supporting the afterlife. It's entitled "A Lawyer Presents the Case for the Afterlife, Irrefutable Objective Evidence." If you're new to this subject, this one book provides a really useful first stop to introduce you to the full range of evidence. The second website is www.survivaltop40.com, and well worth a visit. Run by Miles Edward Allen, it has evidential stories graded to check if they warrant being included in the top 40 cases. Then there's whitecrowbooks.com, a British publisher specialising in metaphysics, spirituality, the nature of consciousness, life after death, and what it calls science not necessarily in the mainstream. Importantly, this website also hosts the regular blog of Mike Tim, who writes a new piece every few weeks on afterlife topics. As well as being the author of The Afterlife Revealed, What Happens After We Die, he's written 5 other titles, so he's definitely worth looking up on Amazon. And finally, 3 websites where you can get free online books. Spirit Writings has over 100 books at www.spiritwritings.com. Survival eBooks has 40 books, including some historical and out-of-print publications at survivalebooks.org. And the International Survivalist Society was actually originally a major source of my own reading. It's no longer current and has been archived, and it's now called Survival After Death, and you can access their library at www.survivalafterdeath.info/library.htm. And that's it for now. Do I have regrets about the books I haven't mentioned? Yes, I do. And the covers of some of these are shown along with the credits at the end of this video. Of course, if you're not new to the subject of afterlife evidence, you will no doubt have your own favourites. So in the comments column below this video, why not mention them for the benefit of other viewers? Thanks for listening.